Kevin Haig.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to begin this contribution, even though it seems odd because it was such a long time ago, in the usual way, in a second reading of thanking members of the Select Committee, thanking the submitters. Most of those members of the Select Committee, as Annette King has remarked, are now gone. But the submitters that are still around, thank you. To the officials, also thanks very much for the great work that you did to support us. And thanks to the Minister today, the Honourable Peseta Sam Lotuinga. Mr. Speaker, much of the impetus for this bill came from the inquiry from the Māori Affairs Select Committee that came up with the grand goal of smoke-free Aotearoa by 2021. A great goal that I think is pretty well universally supported by members of this House. And part of what that inquiry realised was that in achieving that goal, we would need to be active across a wide range of different domains. So we'd need to be increasing social marketing around tobacco, but recognising that smoking is not really a rational choice. Social marketing by itself is clearly not enough. We needed to be more aggressively increasing the price of tobacco, because that is good evidence of the effectiveness for that. We needed to be extending smoke-free areas. Fantastic initiatives from previous Labor governments, and Annette King has mentioned Helen Clark. I'd like to mention Annette King herself as being someone who's very strongly contributed in that area. We needed to be moving into the supply side, licensing retailers for tobacco products. And I have to say, it's been very disappointing, sir, to see that really we haven't increased the social marketing. The prices have increased since the inquiry was finalised, but not nearly at the rate that the experts told us was required. We have not extended smoke-free areas, and there have been no supply-side controls. But in this one area of plain packaging or standardised packaging, that is the topic for this particular bill, there has been a bill. And as Ian Lees-Galloway has remarked, in some ways the idea that sits behind this bill now with a changed name, in some ways the idea behind that is in fact to do away with the last vestige of marketing, because not so long ago, 20 years ago, we could have gone to any sports stadium in the country and seen billboards around the outside advertising Rothmans or Benson and Hedges or other cigarette brands. And such a sight today would be a total shock to someone who was not exposed to that. And I've done the experiment of showing photographs of those stadiums to young people, and their eyes widen because they can't believe that that was allowed. So what the tobacco companies have done is responded by making their packs mini billboards for their products. And so those cigarette packs littered around our cities. The point of them, from the point of view of the industry, is to market the product. Mr. Speaker, I mention all of that by way of preamble because we are currently not on track to hit that goal of smoke-free Aotearoa by 2021. And that slow action, being a slow follower rather than a leader on the part of this government, will ensure that we do not meet that target. And so the delay in bringing this bill back to the House is, in my view, inexcusable. I've mentioned Helen Clark and Annette King. I do also want to particularly acknowledge the contributions of the Honourable Tariana Turia and Hone Harawira in the last several parliaments on this kaupapa of smoke-free Aotearoa, and their impetus behind plain packaging was incredibly important. I also want to mention Marama Fox, in fact, and how much I enjoyed Marama Fox walking out of the interview on television at the weekend with the latest of those big tobacco representatives who's come to our country to try and tell us how we should be making our domestic policy. And Mr. Speaker, I raise that because as Annette King in her contribution noted, in the Select Committee we received a lot of submissions. Some of the very worst of the submissions that we received were from the tobacco industry. They were contributions that were frequently amateurish, where the tobacco industry sought to give us a vaguely sciencey sounding or looking submission. They were from proxies of the industry, people whose research was funded by the industry itself. And I found it extraordinary, actually, the amateurish nature of those submissions. And I believe, sir, that they were amateurish because they were from an industry that is used to getting its own way and is very slowly adapting to a public policy environment where it is required to actually front up with evidence. And in this case, an industry that did not have that evidence. And I celebrate, in fact, that that industry has become a pariah industry. But I want to say something to the members of another submitter, to the members, in fact, of the Food and Grocery Council, an organisation that opposed the plain packaging bill that we're discussing here today, and has opposed, in fact, every single piece of legislation that I have seen in my time in this House aimed at reducing harm from tobacco, and is now spreading that same approach to measures that are intended to reduce harm from alcohol and from the food environment. And I say to the members of that Food and Grocery Council, who are many more than simply those members from those industries, please think carefully about who you want to represent you and whether you want to be the proxies for those industries. So, Mr. Speaker, while we receive some poor submissions, we'll receive some very good ones also. And I do want to particularly note the submissions from Hāpai Te Hauora, from ASH, from the Smoke Free Coalition, from the Public Health Association, and so that across many years now, those organisations have been the sources of authoritative and useful information to members in this House. And in that connection, sir, I want to say that this House, as we seek to take not only this measure forward, but also those other tobacco control measures forward that we will need to reach that smoke-free Aotearoa goal, that we will be the poorer for the government's decision to remove the funding from organisations like the Smoke Free Coalition and from ASH. And that is a retrograde step which I hope that the Minister, who I can see is intently listening to this contribution, will reconsider. Because Mr. Speaker, those organisations form a vital part of that public debate on tobacco control. They have an essential contribution to make to reducing the harm from this industry. And let's remember, sir, that every year 5,000 New Zealanders die from preventable tobacco-related illness. 600 of those are Māori. And everything that this House can do, everything that the government can do, everything that civil society can do to prevent those deaths, we should be doing. Thank you, sir.
A point of order, Annette